an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 1, Episode 5, Animal Control. In this episode, I really thought an episode named Animal Control would have to do with the werewolves, and it doesn't. It's so much funnier than that. This episode was really good. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashley for commissioning this episode. Ashley is here in the chat. Hey, lady. And I gotta tell you, the moment that I realized what Animal Control was actually for, I fell out. What a great idea. And the way they divide this episode up was actually, I thought, really smart storytelling. So we start off the episode with Laszlo and Nadja together. And the thing that they're both sort of coping with is feelings of, well, he is the one that sort of feels to be perpetuating this, and she seems to be the one that is actually aware that things aren't great. He doesn't seem to quite notice yet. I'm interested to see if that continues or what. But Nadja's a little bored. And it opens with her and Laszlo having just eaten somebody, talking about how the guy must have had high blood pressure because he was such a spurter, which just makes me so uncomfortable, you guys. Oh, God. It just really does. I hate it so much. All of the layers to why that's funny are also why it's awful. And then he spots their new neighbor that just moved in across the street, and is like, you know what? Hold up. I'm going to go eat this guy. And she's like, we just ate. What are you talking about? And he's like, I don't know. Well, and he had just suggested that they go home and have sex, and she's like into it. And then he sees this guy and gets immediately distracted. This is one of those things that I find really funny, because in a lot of the comedy that I watch, there is an emphasis on the fact that in relationships, it's the woman who wants to keep having sex and the guy who seems to have lost interest. Whether he's lost interest in her specifically or has lost interest in like having sex and just jerks off instead. This is like a very recurring theme. And I think about how in the 90s, all of the comedy was about how guys want to have sex, but their wives don't want to anymore. And it's just, for me, the modern comedy matches what I've seen in real life a lot more. The women friends that I have who are in long-term relationships complain a lot of the fact that they are more interested in sex than their partner seems to be. It just, I don't know where the 90s thing came from. And it's wild because when you try and think of like 90s comedy that circles around sex, what is it called? The show with Al Bundy, Married with Children. That show is like one of the first things that comes to mind for me. 90s comedy sex. That's Married with Children, like no question. But the ongoing joke in that show was also that his wife constantly wanted to have sex and Al didn't want to. And so, not even like one of the most popular shows of the subject of all time ever went with well, my wife's not interested anymore as the punchline. Who started this? Where did that come from? And I also think back to what Peggy looked like and the fact that Al didn't want to have sex with her. And I can't understand it. Just for the record, Peggy was hot AF. Like, come on, duh. But that's a whole other thing. So I just wanted to talk about that as the premise for this episode, because she is feeling a little neglected and a little bored, and he doesn't notice. So he's like, why don't I eat this guy and you can watch? That's kinky. And she just says, is it? And then it smash cuts, which was such good editing. I have realized so much recently, y'all, how editing affects how funny something is. And I mean, obviously, TikTok is really the arbiter at this point of what is funny regarding videos. And the fact that you can edit the way you do in a TikTok, to me, is a major factor. And I think it has caused me to grow a little bit more self-conscious of the fact that I don't edit my shit, even though it's not video. And I think about it a lot, like, would my show be a lot funnier if I edited it differently? I feel like probably, but also I don't have it. I don't have the time to do that, you know? But anyway, this smash cut from her saying, is it? With that expression fucking kills me. And we go to Nandor and Guillermo across the street who are watching this whole thing, which is what like saves the day, because otherwise I don't know how they would have found Laszlo if they weren't observing, because eventually Nadja just leaves. She's like, I'm not here for this, Laszlo. I'm sorry, bye. So otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. I guess Laszlo would have eventually gotten out. He could probably use, like, you know, his hypnosis. But it's just I was sort of wondering once he goes in there, and I began to cotton on to, oh, animal control, he's going to get caught. I was like, how are they going to find him? And then we see them watching across the street. I think Nandor has a telescope. And he says something about how, like, the two of them are always bickering, and Guillermo chimes in, and Nandor is like, no, I can make fun of them. They're vampires. You don't get to make fun of them. And then immediately repeats what the fuck Guillermo just said as his own thought. I mean, let's be honest. I think we've all been in a position where we feel like Nandor feels. There's always somebody in a group that thinks they're part of a thing that you're like, yeah, but you're not part of this. A guy who's trying to make jokes that women can make about other women. But guys, if they make the same joke, I'm sorry, no. If you're black, somebody who's white making a joke that you're like, no, you don't get, that's not for you. And as much as it's like, Nandor, what do you have Guillermo around for if he can't, like, engage with you? I could see wanting to have somebody around all the time that you can be like, this isn't for you, because then you constantly feel like you have this exclusivity to everything you do, and you get to watch this person who actively can't participate. And for some people, not for me, for the record, but for some people, half the fun of a thing is the fact that you can do it and other people can't. For me, I always want to share everything, and I always feel bad if I've experienced something that a lot of other people aren't able to. But the idea of exclusivity is like, it's a marketing buzzword for a reason. It works. People love feeling as if they're getting access to something that is extremely special, that maybe was made specifically for them or for people of their caliber because they're better people somehow. So, you know, the whole idea of keeping somebody around so that you can just always be like, yeah, but I'm better than you and I can do that and you can't. I could totally see some folks that I have met personally who would be into that whole aesthetic. So they eventually see that Nadja leaves, and they see this, what he had tried to do, he being Laszlo, was mind control the neighbor into just submitting to being fed on with no fight. And when he gets interrupted and turns into a bat, because this guy apparently has a girlfriend or a wife or somebody who's living with him, and she comes in the midst of this. So he turns into a bat immediately. She bugs out and begins to go after him with a broom. While she's doing this, just to watch the scene, the man that he has hypnotized, mesmerized, is there a difference? I don't know what the difference is, just being up front. I'm going to go with mesmerized. The guy that he's mesmerized is just standing there with no reaction to her battling this bat. So I have to assume this guy is going to remain in this state, having been mind controlled, without Laszlo, unless Laszlo steps in and is like, "Oh, you're out of it now," because it seemed like Laszlo turning into a bat and everything going haywire didn't actually like break the connection there at all. I don't know if maybe it's a distance thing. And when he got brought to the animal hospital that was far enough away, I don't think so. It doesn't seem like that's how it works. It's not like Wi-Fi. But, you know, what do I know? So I'm wondering, this show does tend to like bring something back around, because that's a great bit of comedy. You know, it's always fun for a joke that was very sort of like slight to suddenly come back around, and it feels like a little Easter egg, a little treat for you. It feels so exclusive. I know what this means because I'm a real fan. But I really wonder if they're going to like bring something back around with that neighbor across the street acting weird, because that like mesmerization has never been broken. So anyway, I'm going to take a break from Laszlo. Here's when he gets captured. His friends, including Colin, go across the street to try and like rescue him. Guillermo, Nandor, and Colin. But as they come to the front door, they see the animal control truck pulling away. So they never actually interact with his girlfriend or wife or whoever she is. So I'm going to come back to the whole thing with Laszlo. But for now, I want to go and talk about Nadja. I had just last week, I think, mentioned how I wondered what was going on with that guy, Gregor, that she was obsessed with in the very first, like the pilot episode, I think it was. They didn't, refer to him again even. There was no mention. And I sort of was like, maybe that we're just going to drop that. I'm not mad about that. It feels like a rich vein to tap, but maybe they just didn't really want to introduce a whole past lives lore into the storyline. And it is kind of wild that they are doing that. That's what this episode is. In my opinion, either it worked, because Nadja basically, spoilers for later on, but she just snaps her fingers in front of Jeffrey's face and is like, "Remember who you are." And all of a sudden these memories come flooding back into his head. Either they are real memories that come flooding back because he is reincarnating and she is able to trigger that, or it was a kind of mesmerization where she implanted memories that aren't real in his head and made him believe these things. And I don't know if she did it on purpose, if it was, "I'm going to make you into Gregor." Maybe she didn't realize that's what she had done. She was just trying to actually bring him back to himself, but she wound up mesmerizing him and didn't realize that's what had happened. There's a lot of directions this could be. I'm going to take it at face value and say he is who she thinks, and it worked. And I'm just going to go with that as my running theory for right now. I am aware that's not necessarily true, and I want to address it, but I just want to say that's what I'm going to go with for the conceit of the rest of the episode. For who knows how much longer too, because he winds up getting carted away at the end of this episode, and I'm not convinced that's going to stay. I think we'll see him again. I hope we see him again. I'll just say that. Because Nadja, she goes to spy on the guy again. And reminder, if you have forgotten from the pilot episode, she sees a man on the street. We see her looking at him from the street. But by the time of the pilot, it's supposed to be that she's been stalking him on and off for a while now. So we're sort of catching up and hearing about him. But she is aware of his general routine and where he lives and all of that already. And he just comes across as this real goof. But he doesn't seem like a shithead or anything. He just seems sort of non-threatening and a little bit desperate, a little too eager, because she's acting like a fucking lunatic and he is eating it up. He doesn't care. She's so hot. She's so alluring, I'm sure, in her vampire way and just how she looks as a person. And you get the impression that he is not used to women throwing themselves at him in the way that she is, and how overtly sexual she's being while she does it. And he is not going to let this pass up, whether or not she seems like she's crazy. Doesn't really matter so much to him. He's just like, oh, she's super into me. Well, I am now into her. And that can happen. You know, if somebody is into you enough, like passionately enough, you can start, despite yourself, to be like, maybe I'm down. I didn't think I was, but oh. I will say that when we saw him in the pilot, I was kind of like, okay, he's acting a little bit desperate. And I get the subtext that they're trying to give him regarding how much he is like willing to overlook her being weird right now. However, are we just going to ignore that this actor is really hot and would definitely actually have women throwing themselves at him? And I felt very vindicated this episode because when his vibe changes, when his memory is restored, asterisk, he is hot as fuck. And then he does like several different sorts of personalities as he cycles through these memories. And I was just really here for it. And I couldn't like grasp what was going on with Nadja being so into this guy and thinking that he was Gregor. And then once you actually get to see him as she still sees him in her head, I was like, oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, he fine. Mm-hmm. And when he says something to her, like, let's have sex let's make love right now on this filthy parking lot floor. I was a little bit like, could convince me. I wouldn't normally, but you know what? Just say that like again, but like slow. But yeah, we have to get there first. So, like I said, she comes to spy on him at work, and he's the guard for this paid parking lot. And I really love this. He's just incredibly impotent. He keeps trying to stop the kids from coming in who are going to just hang around and skateboard. There's nothing that he can do. They mock him about how he's not a cop. And, and they just go right on past him, and all he can do is be like, I'm taking your names down, which, like, how do you even know them? You don't know them. That's an empty threat, right? So it just, he's just very sort of pathetic. And they dress him in such a way, both for his uniform here and for their date later when they are at the carnival together, in oversized clothing that camouflages, and I think is what they're attempting to do, how good he actually looks. They're trying to give him a certain vibe. And it's very different with men than it is with women, in my opinion, because women wear makeup more often than men. So the potential for leveling up when you include makeup in the equation is unlimited. And by leveling up, I mean in terms of your appearance. If we start with base you, buck-ass naked, no clothing, no makeup, and just hair neat and clean but not styled, that's you at 0. That's our neutral. And then it can go either up or down. I consider going down to be wearing clothes that don't fit well, that don't make you feel good, your hair being really dirty or messy and just it not feeling like you are put together, and anything regarding appearance that overall makes you look less like you have put in any effort and feel shitty about yourself. And then when you go into the plus column, now we're talking, I feel good. I feel like this looks good on me. I feel sexy in this. I feel cute in this, whatever. And just overall, there is a sense to me of, I did some maintenance for this. I cared about myself, And I feel like the spectrum for women is so much wider because, one, we are held to a much higher standard overall than men. And two, we do things with our hair and makeup that most men, it's just not considered necessary. So there's a lot further for us to go from super frump to super hot. With men, that spectrum is less wide, you know, and like looking dirty and not put together, we have a very different reaction to that with men than we do with women. So I'm all of this to say, I'm sorry, you guys know my tangents. It's fine. All of this to say, this guy, them trying to like sort of dress him down to sort of hide how hot he is, it takes a lot less than I would have thought to make him forgettable looking. Like, he is wearing this shearling coat and a hat that like covers his ears, and it's like one of those that you can flip the ear flaps up if it's hot, and you know, it looks like something you'd go hunting in, basically. And he's got this giant bulky scarf, and overall the way that he stands, everything about his body language and how delicate he is trying to feed her a piece of popcorn. This whole moment for me, I can't believe the difference between later on when she brings his memory back. She's talking to him and she just says, "What has happened to you? I know why this has happened because they named you Jeff." I love how at the beginning of this episode, she can't even remember the name Jeff. It's just really, like, it's just so baffling to her that doesn't jive with who he is supposed to be in her head at all. And then eventually she's like, oh, no, the name, that's the problem. I get it now, you know? Like, so when she tells him, remember, and he straightens up and he takes his hat off, and immediately, just the hat being gone, you're like, oh, word? And it just progresses. You know, he just like the way he squares his shoulders, the way he like approaches her now versus how he stood before, is a whole nother vibe. And this is what I mean when I say, like, it can be such subtle things that become what signal to you, oh yeah, this person has confidence. This person they are trying, they are giving a shit. Eventually later on, there's no scarf. The shearling coat is open and the collar is turned down. And he's wearing this t-shirt, this Henley underneath, which Henleys, everybody who is attracted to men, can I get an amen? Because Henleys are sex. I don't know why. I don't make the rules. Henleys are the hottest fucking thing. I don't know. And I mean this because a Henley looks as good. Like, okay, I'm going to say as good, but asterisk. But what I'm saying is there are certain things that look super hot on men who are extremely jacked. But you put that same thing on a guy who isn't buff, and it just doesn't do anything. You're like, yeah, that's nothing. Henleys are something that I have seen on men who are heavier and who are super jacked, and they have inspired the same level of ooh in both cases. Henleys are just like that. And maybe that's just me, but from the response that I have seen when I bring Henleys up with my friends who are attracted to men, I don't think it's just me. And I think that they are used to like indicate a more like salt of the earth sexy man. I think that is a recurring theme and choice for costume designers on purpose. So when he has his shearling coat open and he has the Henley underneath, the first like 4 buttons of the Henley are open now. And it's just like showing his chest hair and the beginning of like his collarbone. And I was just like, oh my God, this guy was a goober at the start of this episode. And all of a sudden he's out here like dancing with her and coming up to her in the car, in the parking lot under the ground. And I was like, oh my God, Nadja, yes, girl, do it. So all of that to say, apparently her and Laszlo are monogamous. I am not certain of that. There's a feel to her when eventually she does say, like, I'm married. But I couldn't tell if that was, I'm married so I can't have sex with you, or I'm married so I have somebody who is a priority that I have to go and see. It felt, honestly to me, it felt more like the second one. Like, it didn't seem as if she was wrestling with whether to have sex with him. It felt like she was first wrestling about whether, like, she could get him back, and then eventually with hoping that he was going to proposition her, and he waits too long to do it, or they wait too long to get somewhere, and she's just frustrated because now her, like, chance is up. Which is part of why I think we're going to see him again. I'm not positive of that, but, like, even if he weren't to get out on his own from wherever he's being, like, held, if she wants to see him, she'll figure it out. You know, she'll find him and break him the hell out of there, maybe. He's not a vampire, though. So, like, that's what I find sort of interesting here is, like I said, this additional lore of including somebody who is, they're apparently, if we're to believe this at face value, they're being reincarnated, and she keeps finding them. And I think I talked in the pilot episode about the whole conceit with, not the, like, original writing of Dracula, but is it Bram Stoker's Dracula? Is that the one that has Gary Oldman in it? But in that one, it's, like, supposed to be basically that there is this woman who looks like his long lost love from hundreds and hundreds of years earlier that he believes is reincarnated into the woman that looks like her, that she's been reincarnated looking exactly like she had looked, which is always one of those things with reincarnation that I find kind of fascinating. It feels like a bit of a cheat to have them look exactly the same every time. But if you don't expect to be dealing with immortals, I guess it shouldn't be an issue. It's once you add immortality that things begin to get a little bit messy. But yeah, I like to think that that's exactly what they're referencing here. I have to assume, with there being like this reincarnated guy that she always winds up finding and always hooks up with. And all of the, like, what's different is that with, the Dracula version, I don't think that he's ever encountered her before reincarnated. It seems to be the first time. And it seems to also be sort of accepted that however she reincarnated, she's going to have, like, the same basic personality and probably, like, the memories and everything as well. But she isn't going to be a very different person. He doesn't seem to expect that. And here, he's like his voices are even different depending. But one of the lives that he was in, he apparently was like a servant. And she seduces him, even though his boss would be really mad about it. And he winds up getting his head cut off because she, like, won't leave him alone. He gets his head cut off by accident in every life that she has been in with him so far. And I find this to be great. This is such a good bit because he doesn't, like, if he isn't gone and we see him again throughout other episodes, you can add a visual gag at least once an episode where it looks like he's about to get his head chopped off from, like, one method or another. And that's one of those jokes that I don't think is going to get old. I think that you could just keep doing that and it will always be like a little tasty treat in there. So this episode, the one that we see, is he has his head under the, like, parking lot arm that comes down to keep you out or in. And he has his, like, neck positioned right between where they come together. And I don't know how those things work. I assume that if it were to hit something, it would go back up again and not actually continue inexorably downward to the point that it would crush a person's spine. But I don't know that. I don't know that. For all I know, it's just like there's no sensor on it of any kind, and it's just gonna keep fucking going down like a turbine or something, you know, like farm equipment, basically. So yeah, I've basically like talked about this whole plot already, but I'll just, to back up a little from when he remembers who he is at the carnival with her. He's trying to feed her popcorn because she doesn't know what that is, and he doesn't understand that she can't eat food. And he keeps talking about ordinary stuff and boring the absolute shit out of her. He says something about how him and his roommate aren't sharing the price of Wi-Fi in the house. Like, just shit that, like, maybe if we were an established couple, this would be of any interest to me. But when we're first going out, why are you telling me any of this? And eventually there is a moment where he gets to do some, like, carnival archery, and it's really, really bad. It's like he can't even shoot an arrow. And she says something to him, like, just basically like, what the fuck? That was pathetic, you know? And she walks away, and you see him just go stupid to himself. Which is one of those things that I didn't realize people actually did. But I have met some people who do that. And don't do that to yourselves, guys. Don't talk to yourself like that. Especially not out loud. In your head is bad enough. Out loud, it's like cementing it. Just don't say that to yourself. But yeah, so that's sort of like the thing that causes her to snap after that, and him talking about the Wi-Fi. And she says that it's his name being Jeff that has ruined everything. And he's willing to take the abuse until she attacks his name, which is the same name that his father and grandfather have. And he can't stand for that. And she interrupts and restores his memories. And we basically cut from his, like, it sort of feels like an acting exercise that you would do in school where you play like one character after another. But we cut from there to them riding up on a horse to the parking garage, and the little shits that were in there, they were just skateboarding. They are coming out, and they see him on the horse, and they don't seem exactly like surprised to see him on a horse. They're just kind of like, well, what's this? Why? And he pulls out the bow and arrow from the what do you call it? Oh my God, guys. Carnival. I've only said it like 6 times. Why can't I remember now? And he shoots them from horseback with the arrows, but it turns out that they are all tipped with a suction cup. So one of them actually sticks to this kid's forehead, and all of them, they're not exactly scared. They're just kind of like, oh, it's like that. Because he just exudes an authority that he did not before. There's just a different whole vibe. This isn't the guy that you want to fuck with anymore. The other one, who cares? You know, that was old Walter White. This is new Walter White. So yeah, in the end, they wind up, they are dancing in the car park. He's got like a mop, and like I said, it's just like really going for it with her in a way that I was just, oh, good for you, Nadja. But then she gets a call about what is going on with Laszlo, and is like, all right, I have to go. I'm sorry. This is not an emergency, actually, but I really should be there. So he looks so hot, you guys. I can't with this. It's not fair. How dare. And she leaves. She has to go get the situation in hand because none of them were able to handle this at all. I swear, this is so funny. All right, let's back up. So after she leaves, like I said, Laszlo tries to mesmerize that guy. Girlfriend comes in, beats him to death. So it looked like. But she winds up calling animal control, which I assume she is like, either this bat is rabid, which is why it was actively attacking my boyfriend, or she knows that it's still alive. She wasn't trying to kill it. And she is not interested in trying to break a bat's neck herself and just put it out of its misery, but also just doesn't want to toss a half-alive bat out in her backyard. And I respect that. So she's called animal control. We don't see her again. And then Guillermo, Nandor, and Colin come across, spot the truck pulling away, and they have to figure out what to do. So they decide that they're just going to try and break him out, which doesn't really seem like it should be that big a deal. You know, like the fact that the heist is, in quotes, takes place somewhere that there's literally 2 employees, one of whom is like almost not part of it because she's out on the road all the time. Y'all should be able to handle this. I have so many questions because Nandor, when they come inside, he attempts to mesmerize the guy at the desk and it doesn't work. And he gets taunted for this by Colin. So I am assuming then, because of this exchange, because Colin tries to say, that's not your strong suit, huh? And he says, well, it has to be, nobody can be made to do something they don't already want to do. And Colin, rightfully, is like, if it's something that they already want to do, then you don't need to mesmerize them at all anyway. And Nandor takes this very personally and hisses at him, which winds up getting this dude's attention again. But is it that true? Like, so in this lore, it's not just all vampires can mesmerize you. It's all vampires can try to mesmerize you, and some of them are really good at it, and some not so much. And that's not to say they have no ability at all. They're not like, I would assume Nandor's abilities aren't at like a human level where nothing happens, but evidently it's not enough to like really stick at all. I don't know. So I'm just very curious if it's like about attitude. Could Nandor be good at it if he practiced or if he had more confidence? And Laszlo is because he's just so sure of himself? Or is this something that you're like born with and Nandor just doesn't have it and he can't do it? Because then we're getting into a tiny bit of like the Twilight territory where each vampire has their own ability. And it's, of course, not as much because this is an ability that falls well within the purview of things that we've been told through, well, Bram Stoker, I guess. Stoker. Hardly know her. Through that lore, mesmerism was sort of part of the package that he created on vampires. But I don't think mind reading or affecting emotions like Jasper or seeing the future, that's nothing, right? I haven't read it. So to be honest, all of this is me citing podcasts I've listened to that covered the actual Dracula story. But yeah, so I'm saying it's not Twilight. People aren't able to do things that are like wildly outside of what traditional lore says a vampire can do. But I just think it's interesting because like the other ability that they have is turning into bats, and it doesn't seem like that's difficult for anybody. Everybody can do that equally, as far as we can see. It would be kind of fun if we like went to a different area of New York and we saw the vampires there, and maybe they don't turn into bats, or it's not as easy, or they turn into other animals that aren't as convenient, you know? Because we see this episode that Nandor turns into a dog. So there are multiple forms, at least 2. It's not surprising to Laszlo that he was able to turn into a dog. Are there more? Or is it just those 2? Because I think, again, if we're going back to Dracula, he was able to turn into like a wolf, I think it was. Or at least people thought he was a wolf. And a bat. Was it a bat or was it just a wolf? But anyway, yeah, I'm just very curious about like the variety of their abilities. I didn't realize that Nandor was not good at this. And it does seem like it's a little easy to always be able to mesmerize people into doing what you want. So I think it's a smart idea, writing-wise, to insert a sort of weakness here so that there's not always a way out, especially if Nandor is the one that needs to find the way out. Like, he can't just say how he wants it to be. Kyle says, Dracula could turn into a bat, a wolf, and mist. Thank you. Mist, Kyle. I forgot that one. Thank you. That is so funny to me. Okay. While we're on the topic, and Kyle, I'm assuming that you've watched either all or more of this show than I have. Later on, there is a gag where we're seeing... Oh, no, wait. You know what? I covered this already. Because I think that in the town council one, or city hall, or whatever it was, they all appear on camera. So we've established already, actually, that they show up on camera and they can see their reflections, right? Or can they just show up on camera and they can't see their reflections? I don't remember about the reflections. I have to assume that, because there's just too, like, they're living in the city. There's too many reflective surfaces and there are too many cameras in 2021. If you can't be seen in a reflection or on camera, your jig is up. Like, that's it, you know? That it would be much, much harder to hide. So I'm going to assume they're visible always. And that's all, like, turning into mist notwithstanding. We haven't seen it, but I won't write it off. But anyway, so when they get there, the guy behind the desk won't submit to Nandor's attempt to mesmerize him. And I love Colin coming along, but like having nothing to offer. Eventually he does, because he starts to feed on the guy at the desk. But it takes a while before he's like willing to really contribute anything. When they first arrive, he just like goes to the bathroom at first. So eventually the woman comes in who actually came and collected Laszlo. And this lady is the woman who was married to, I think the character's name was Earl in Men in Black. Was it Men in Black 1 or 2? I think it's the first one, right? He is the bug man, the guy who's like just a mass of cockroaches. And she is in comedy a lot. And I was actually pretty delighted to see her again, because it's been a minute since I've seen her in anything. And she has a really distinctive voice and look. And I was just like, oh, this is a great bit for her, actually. I like this character for her. So yeah, she's playing the animal control lady. And on the way in, they're like they're holding on to the van. And I love that they make like some like, whoo sound. And she like looks over her shoulder and says, that sounded like an owl to me. I am assuming that she's talking to the like guys with the cameras, because they pretended that they were going to cover what she does for her work. Because that is another thing that between this and there's a moment with Gregor where he says, are the cameras with you? And she has to mesmerize him to not notice the cameras. They keep acknowledging the cameras being around, you know? They also did this when they arrived at the nightclub, I'm pretty sure, in the last episode. I don't know if I mentioned it or not. So I keep forgetting that that's like an inside joke, and that they're like, oh yeah, we know that that's... We have to keep in mind that that's the context everything falls in, you know? So this woman is saying that she thinks that sound was an owl, them hanging onto the back and screaming as they go careening around corners. And she is the one that winds up coming out and showing the guy at the desk the photos that she took of this bat. And it's so great because she says something like, look at this bat. Doesn't this look like a little like English gentleman? Like, And guys, it never occurred to me, but we absolutely do this with animals, where we say that they look like very specific people. And I love the idea that we are saying that about an animal who can turn into that exact person that we're describing. Like, there's a reason they look that way, and it's because that is indeed who they are. I think this is just such a, like, subtle joke, and I love it so much. And eventually his, like, erect bat dick is out, and she, like, took a picture and brought it to this guy also. Laszlo, what's going on, buddy? So, eventually, Nandor, I can't remember if the first time he uses Colin as distraction, but Nandor gets into the, like, area where the animals are kept, and he finds a bat. Notice I say a bat, and not Laszlo. He finds a bat, thinks it's Laszlo, and brings it outside and releases it. And then the bat just flies away. And I love Nandor's initial reaction is not to realize that that wasn't Laszlo. It's, "You're welcome, dick." You know, but I don't remember the exact line, but it's something like that. Just basically like, "Wow, okay, fuck you too then. I just got you out of prison," basically. And everybody else has to be like, "Are you sure that was Nandor?" Or no, sorry, Laszlo? And them, when they begin to realize that it likely wasn't, they also think about the fact that that animal was in there because it was getting treated for some sort of illness or injury. And you've just released it out into the world still ill or injured. So wow, that's messed up. They are out here like eating people on the regular. But then this like bat that he's released, they're all like, "I hope you think about this." You know, like, you should feel this one. So this is when he calls Nadja, and she gets interrupted on her lovely night with Gregor. And she shows up. Colin is talking to the guy at the desk. I can't remember what Colin is even saying, but it's something about like the kind of like, oh God, I'm trying to think, a kind of permit that you need to get in somewhere. It's just like nothing interesting. The usual sort of, "Oh God, kill me now" kind of conversation. And she goes up, and this guy is so like sucked dry by Colin already that she just straight up says, "What's the code to the door?" That's it. She just literally asks. And the guy says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And she's so annoyed. They called her away from her date. And this is the like depth of the puzzle that she was expected to solve because they just fucking couldn't manage without her. Yeah, girl, I fucking feel you. Honestly, that was like a relatable moment. And she gets inside. And, oh my God, I had forgotten. In the meantime, before Nandor gets in touch with her, I think it's Guillermo, actually, that calls her because Nandor is locked up inside. He thought that in order to get to Laszlo, it would be a really smart idea to turn into a dog and get picked up by animal control and brought in a cage. So he's like thought through the first part of how do I get into the area with all the animals, but he didn't think through how the fuck do I get out of there again. So he gets brought in thinking he's been really bright when he hasn't actually done anything. And before he even gets there, we have these amazing scenes with Laszlo attempting to communicate with the animals. And there is a cat that he's like sort of, it's unclear. He seems like he's tricked himself into thinking that they're communicating, but I don't know that that's what's going on. He may be actually communicating, and I just don't know how that works between a vampire and a cat. They might be conversing, and I'm just the one who's a dodo who doesn't know. But regardless, he's trying to mesmerize this cat into like leaving its cage and coming and unlocking his cage. Unsurprisingly, he is not successful. But the discussions of it and him turning from a bat back into a person, back into a bat still within the cage is really funny to me. I really liked both the joke itself and the conceit of having the camera be a security cam up in the corner every time. I thought that was a really good choice. So, like I said, Nandor gets caught, he gets brought in, he can't get out, and that is evidently when Guillermo calls Nadja about this whole thing. So, yeah, she just fucking asks for the code and goes in and lets them both out. And I just really sort of enjoy the fact in some ways that they like are so worthless without her. They just can't get shit done. But also, as a woman, a lot of us are in a position where it sort of feels like nobody is competent except us because they are so used to always depending on us for everything. And to a degree, that can be not a great feeling. As much as we are intended to take it as a compliment, the older we get, the more we realize we've been scammed. So that's how I feel as well with Nadja. I'm just kind of like, on the one hand, I love that they need her. On the other hand, I'm like, oh, guys, get a grip, And meanwhile, Gregor got picked up by the cops, and because it just seems like he's either got multiple personality or schizophrenia or something, he is exhibiting symptoms of somebody who's mentally unwell. The cops come and take him in, and he doesn't, it's really interesting to me because it's like the way that she chose to restore his memories. It's not like he has reincarnated in the way that she has seen him before, or maybe he has. Like, this is actually something that I didn't think of. Because what I was going to say was, in the past, he has known who she was. And I'm realizing there's no reason for me to think that. It could potentially, all of this is completely one-sided. And he has just looked like the same person, and that's how she recognizes him. And I'm assuming that's what it is, that he looks like the same person every time. And he always is meeting Nadja for the first time. That makes more sense. But at the same time, she talks to him with the name that he used to have. And it doesn't seem like that, having to like change names for him or whatever, has crossed her mind. Of course, maybe she's just so like, no, you're Gregor, that it doesn't matter whether or not he has protested. Oh no, my name is James, actually. She has never cared, What I'm saying is I'm just trying to get like a lock on the reason that it seems like he's really losing it here, when it wasn't ever mentioned before that he lost it and started having memories of all of his lives at once. So I'm guessing that in the past, even if he was somebody of a totally different personality who did not remember her, he was still hot in his way. There was still a draw. And she sees him here reincarnated, and it's the very first time that draw hasn't been there for her. That's what I'm assuming happened. And that's why the special case of her, like, giving him all his memories at once, when she's never done that before, and that's why he's starting to break now. I wonder if that's going to have, like, I want to see him again. I want to know what effect this has. Is this permanent? Can he pick one version of himself and stay in that version? And will she want him around? I feel like she seems pretty fucking into him. And he hasn't had his head cut off. And I feel like that has to happen if we're going to say goodbye to this character. I have a lot of questions about the whole thing with Gregor. And I'm, like I said, really excited that we got to see him again this episode, because I just sort of wrote it off. I was like, well, I thought that was fun and they could have done more with that. But okay, it was a pilot. And a lot of times things brought up in pilots do get dropped with no acknowledgement of any kind. The other thing that I was sort of hoping for, but that we didn't get this episode, is another check-in with new vampire girl. Last episode, I think it was, is the one that starts off with her being found, quote, dead by her, like, dorm mate, and waking up as they're, like, they've already declared her dead and are rolling her out to the ambulance, and she just wakes up. we end with her like running from the camera here. And again, if we're going to acknowledge the cameras, I wonder what she thinks there was a camera there for. Why she thinks she's being interviewed. Because she talks to the camera about feeling sick and her symptoms, you know, when she's looking really like scary. So yeah, I wonder what the story is with her, like giving an interview, who she thinks she's talking to. I don't need an answer to that. Like, I'm not wrapped up in always explaining this. Like, it's fine. But because the show has chosen to acknowledge it over and over again, I feel like there has to be something that they've decided with this, you know? But yeah, so I'm kind of, I guess, expecting that we're going to check in with her like every other episode instead of every episode. I really do want to know what's happening with her, though. That's one of those things that I am not mad about how much it's spaced out. I actually think that's a really smart way to get the seeds planted for carrying on a storyline into the second season. Just doing these tiny little check-ins with her. And then maybe by the end of this season, she'll have come into herself more and suddenly knock on their door. And that's the end of the first season. And then the second season is coping with this new person. That's something that can be really hard for shows that have excellent first seasons, is figuring out how to keep the magic alive or bring the magic back for the second season. And a lot of times shows that start out really, really strong, part of the strength is that they had an exceptional self-contained story, and continuing things onward after that feels really unnatural. This show isn't going to have that because they don't have like an ongoing arc really, except for the overall, we need to take over Staten Island arc, which is very like, that's not the point of the show. That's a goal for our characters to have, but that's not what the audience is here for, right? We're not like, we have to see like Ocean's 11. We have to see how they rob the guy. We have to see how they take over Staten Island. We all know the likelihood of them actually taking over Staten Island is minimal. What would that even look like? Guys, you know what? I'm sitting here saying the point is that they're failures and we're watching them like really just be bad at this. What if I'm wrong and they take over Staten Island and they just like, that's just where the story decides to go. They're like, oh yeah, no, we know that you don't take these guys seriously. So in order to be surprising, we're going to have them like succeed. And what is, just really go haywire with that whole storyline. I guess that's one way to go. Watching them constantly fail is funny, though. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on this because then you can have characters like Gary Gergich who constantly fails but succeeds anyway. And that is also funny. But part of that is the fact that everybody on the show also underestimates him as well as the viewers. So I am going to go with they don't take over Staten Island. So sue me. But if they're going to keep attempting to take over Staten Island, maybe this girl, whose name I'm forgetting, by the way, I'm just calling her new vampire girl in my head. Maybe this girl could be an asset to them in that way. I mean, at least this is one person that Nadja has actually turned. And I feel like that's something to show to the Baron, who we haven't seen since episode 1, I'm pretty sure. But the Baron will want to see some progress towards taking everything over, and turning somebody is sort of bare minimum with like, yeah, I'm doing stuff to like, secure our ranks here. So maybe that will work out in their favor, but the fact that they don't turn left and right, I wonder if it's like a regulated thing. 'Cause that can be, in some vampire lores, you have to like get permission from people before you turn someone. And it's sort of like frowned on if you just go willy-nilly turning a bunch of people. That said, I'm not mad if we decide to do like an arc where they are turning people willy-nilly. Like that would be kind of fun to see them having to compete with too many vampires per square mile of Manhattan. You know what I mean? That would be actually kind of fun too. Anyway, I'm wildly off base now, but I really, really enjoyed this episode. And I just think that this show is such a great idea. I am certain that I've asked you guys before if there's another season coming or how many seasons there are total. I am so sorry that I never remember these things. I probably should like keep a little like cheat sheet somewhere in my notes and just, you know, be able to check that. But I always resist looking up things like that because you can get spoiled so easily. And I always, when something might be currently airing, I never want to Google it. Because then you'll get some fucking like headline like, John Smith, the actor, explains the death scene of so-and-so favorite, you know, and they say like the title of the show. And you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, cool. I know that character dies then. Thanks for nothing. AMC. I'm looking at you. Anyway, I am very curious to see how far they go with this show. And I'm really hoping that it's still airing. Because I feel like we need something to like sustain us now that Brooklyn Nine-Nine is getting taken off the air. I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine is airing its last half season. I think they recorded half a season and they didn't do the second half. And pretty much everybody agrees that because of everything with cops right now, it's for the best to just like let the show die a distinguished and dignified death because it's gone on for a good amount of time since it got picked back up again. And did really well for what it was, and it's time. So I would love it if What We Do in the Shadows could sort of pick up that torch and keep going with it. Ashley says there are 2 seasons and plans for a third, I think. Okay, cool. Sorry, Ashley, I asked again, how many episodes per season? Kyle says, boy, is that gonna be a thing, capital A, capital T. Is it gonna be a thing, Kyle? Because they're airing it now. And I really would have thought if people were going to like get upset about it, we would have started to hear about it already because it's already airing. But I haven't really seen anyone talking about it or anything like that. So yeah, regarding Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I'm assuming is what Kyle meant. But yeah, it's a shame. That's one of those shows where the first season can be kind of rough. They do a lot of like fat phobic humor in the first season, which is a bummer. I didn't really notice it the first time that I watched it. And then when I went and rewatched recently, I was like, wow, there's literally an entire episode devoted exclusively to making fun of a dead fat man. Like, cool. But after that, the later seasons grew to be so warm and familiar in this like way that only those kind of ensemble shows can really do. And yet the whole cop thing really, it's tough to work around that at this point. I support a tweet that I saw where they said they should just open a new season and they're all like teachers at an elementary school and it's never acknowledged that they were ever cops on the show. And that would have been kind of funny. Ashley says, looks like 9 episodes a season. Okay. So I'm on 5. So this is like the halfway point for the first season. So there's not like that much to go before I'm caught up with what's airing. I wonder if it is airing and I got to that point and you guys wanted to keep commissioning me. I wonder if there's a place where I can watch them be released in real time or if I have to wait for the whole season to be over. Just something to check into later. Let's see. Last season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine isn't on right now. It premieres in August. Oh, Kyle, I'm sorry. There was something shared on a page that like regarding Terry Crews with a scene from the show. And I thought that it was like the newest season. Must have been misunderstanding that. All right. Well, yeah, maybe it is going to be a thing then. Okay, everybody, I'm going to wrap. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me. Thank you again so much to Ashley for commissioning the episode. I appreciate you all very much. Hope that you've been enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.